Hi, everyone. Um, I'm Jennifer Howze. You will notice that I am not Eleanor Mills, but I am standing in for Eleanor on this noon book club. She is away on holiday, so I have the honor of talking with our noon book club author this month, Emily Edwards. So we're going to wait just a few minutes in case anyone else is going to file in. We are recording this, so as you may know, if you're not watching it live, that's fine. You can always, if you miss a noon book club, you can also always watch it later. If questions pop up for you, do write them in the chat and we'll get to them. Emily will be happy to chat and answer questions and all that. But yeah, we're going to have a really good discussion. I'm going to close my blinds. I'm getting some kind of weird marks across my face from the setting sun. But yeah, I hope everyone's having a very nice, what are we? Wednesday afternoon. It's hard to know on a bank holiday week, isn't it?
It is. It's going to be last day of August.
Last day of August. Oh. It is. Yes, it's really becoming that back to school season. So
yeah, transitionary time, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and start. I may go ahead and let more people in, so don't be surprised if you see more people filing in. If you've just joined us, we are here at the Noon Book Club. I'm not Eleanor Mills, as you will see. I'm Jennifer Howze. I am a colleague of Eleanor's. I've worked with her on Noon. I worked with her at the Times, and I'm currently editorial director at NetMoms, but thrilled that she asked me to step in while she is away to speak with Emily Edwards, author of The Herd. So as you'll see, we've made this a little bit more intimate because it's a Zoom meeting, but we do ask that you keep your video off and your mics muted so we don't get kind of any interference as we chat. As questions come up, do feel free to pop them into the chat and we will get to them after we have a kind of initial reading and Emily asks some noon questions. So thank you everyone for coming tonight and let's get started. So first of all, I would like to give a big noon welcome to Emily. Emily, thank you so much for being with us here on this Wednesday evening.
Very happy to be here.
So I'll tell you a little bit about Emily. So the book that we are here talking about today, as you'll know, is The Herd. And I frankly could not put it down. So Emily, she studied at Edinburgh University, where she went to work for a think tank in New York before returning to London. And here she worked as a support worker for vulnerable women at a large charity. She now lives in Lewes. I never know how to say that.
That's it, Lewes, you've got it.
In East Sussex, where her endlessly patient husband and her two endlessly energetic young sons, age 2 and 4, are around her. She's decamped to a friend's house to talk to us today to get a little bit of peace and quiet and grown-up book club time. And she's going to talk to us a bit about the inspiration for The Herd and its genesis. But first, we want to say welcome, Emily, and we can't wait to get started.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a strange experience having you sort of, a little potted life history read back to me, but I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Not too bad. Not too bad. Okay, well, shall we start up? So y'all may have read the book already, or you may just have been interested in coming along. So The Herd, there's safety in numbers, but one person can change that. Why don't we start off with a bit of a reading? Emily.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Do you want to give us just a little preamble about the book itself?
Sure. So the book focuses on best friends, Brian and Elizabeth. They've been best friends for decades, and they've chosen to live on the same road as each other in the same small town, much like Lewes. And even though they're very, very different, I describe them as sort of cheese and pineapple, a sort of unlikely combination, but something that just kind of works, you know, their friendship just works really well. But they differ on one really important issue, and that's without knowing it, they differ on the issue of vaccinations. So Elizabeth is very pro-vaccination and Bri is vaccine hesitant. And this all comes to a head at a child's birthday party, where a white lie, a lie of omission really, leads to devastating consequences for everyone involved, and a enormous court case that changes history, really. So yeah, in brief, that's what it's about.
All right, great. And what's your reading for us going to be?
So I'm going to read from sorry, I'm just trying to do my settings slightly because I'm losing, all I can see is myself, and I'd quite like to see you, Jennifer.
Oh, you'd like to see me? I will come back on.
Is that okay? I find it distracting just to see myself.
Right, exactly.
So I'm going to read from the very first vignette. The book is interspersed with vignettes from different points of view, different viewpoints around the vaccination issue. So I'm going to start with the first vignette, and then which sort of sets the scene for the novel and sort of foreshadows what is to come. And then I thought I'd read a brief passage as well from a scene where Brian and Elizabeth's husbands, Ash and Jack, are on a run together. I really wanted the husbands to have they're very key characters in the book, and that felt really important as I wrote it. Often I feel like they're sidelined in books such as this. So yes, so I'm going to read, I'll read the first section now and then fill you in a little bit before I read the second section, if that's okay.
Fantastic.
So Farleigh County Court, December 2019. They arrive in court separately. Bri first, early, perhaps to avoid the worst of the demonstrations outside. She keeps her dark, hollow eyes fixed right ahead of her head bowed as if in prayer. Ash's arm around her before she crumples into her seat, just in front of the judge's bench. The last time I saw Bri or Elizabeth was months ago, at the now infamous party. I remember watching them and feeling, as I always did when it came to those two, a tug of envy, like a great hook in my abdomen, pulling. It wasn't what they said or did, quite the opposite, in fact. It was the absence of explanation. There was a calmness between them, a knowing, because they were both absolutely confident of the other. Their friendship made them seem untouchable somehow. I've never had that with anyone. It's a few minutes before the doors open again. The whole court shifts, sits more upright, as Elizabeth walks into the large, serious room, Jack a couple of paces behind. Her eyes cast about, scanning to see who is there to support them. She nods at a couple of people. Her gaze lands for just a beat on Bri and Ash. Her expression doesn't even flicker before she moves on. Her composure is impressive, silently letting us all know she is blameless, unafraid. She takes her place on the other side of the court to Bri. Her solicitor leans forward to whisper something, and Elizabeth nods in agreement, careful not to smile. Next to me, a woman I recognise from the school gate says quietly, "It's so sad, isn't it?" She sighs. Then she finishes whatever she was doing on her phone before dropping it into her coat pocket and turning back to me. I always found their friendship a bit weird, to be honest. I mean, they were so different, weren't they? I nod and wonder whether she feels it too. This sense of something lacking, the hook pulling, that behind all the gossip, all the bullshit chat about school plays and football teams, we're starving for each other, for connection. Is she, like me, desperate to see and truly be seen by another woman? I heard Elizabeth was almost assaulted by one of those anti-vax demonstrators yesterday. Her voice is light, bouncy with glee. Her phone buzzes and she snatches it out of her pocket. I turn back to face the court and I think, no, not her. She doesn't feel it. Now sitting here, I realise it was stupid of me. Stupid to be jealous of Brian and Elizabeth. Because if this court case is the cost of true friendship, families devastated, lives destroyed, then it can't be worth it. Maybe women like us are the lucky ones after all. Maybe our distance from each other keeps us safe, helps us to hide our wounds, our fears, so we can't be injured by others. Lone wolves making our way as best we can. Now, I'm happy to read another section, but maybe, I don't know, how do you feel? Do you feel like that's enough for now, or should I read another section? Oh.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about it.
Great.
It's funny because I found this book. It's so familiar, so many bits of it. Like you recognize it from, life going on right now, current events, the kinds of attitudes you see everywhere. Tell us a little bit about how it came about. There's an afterword in the book where you describe that a bit, but what was the real impetus? Did you feel very moved or caught up in a kind of pro-vaccination, anti-vaccination conversation yourself?
Yes, I did. So I had the idea for the book when I was pregnant with our first boy, our first child. And I had no idea of the kind of mum that I was going to be, but I knew the kind of mum that I wanted to be. And I wanted to be strong and clear and sort of unflappable, to know where I stood on these things. And yet, that was opposite to how I felt inside.
Oh.
And we had, so for our first birth, we'd hired a doula, which I'm sure most people know, but a doula is often a woman and a sort of support for birth, because you never know what midwives you're going to have, etc. So we hired this wonderful doula, and I really liked her. Like, I really rated her, and she was strong and clear and all these things I wanted to be. And then one day my husband and I were having a chat about our birth plans with our doula. It was a boiling day. He was born on the 2nd of August, so it was high summer. I was bouncing on my birthing ball in the garden, probably being a bit cross. And our doula asked us, so are you planning on vaccinating the baby? And my husband, who is very science-based, very pragmatic person, said, yes, absolutely, 100% we are vaccinating the baby. And our doula came back with all these sort of reasons, all the reasons why she had chosen not to vaccinate her sons. And to me, they sounded like, I'd never ever considered vaccination, and they sounded like very clear, well thought through, valid reasons. And basically they ended up having like a pretty explosive argument, and I was just there in the middle of it, bouncing away, thinking, what the hell is going on here? I've got no idea what we're going to do. And feeling sort of overwhelmed by the responsibility and totally out of control, but also sitting there and thinking this would make a bloody brilliant book, because surely, if I have faced this question, this is a question that all new parents have to face, is whether they vaccinate their child or not. So yeah, so that was kind of the genesis of the book.
Yeah. So we've had rather than hold questions to the end, I'm going to ask them kind of as they come in. So Ishbel Hansen says, I have a son with complex disabilities, so I found myself recognizing so much of what is in this book. Absolutely riveting. Thank you so much. I don't know why I'm saying that. I didn't write it.
Yeah, gosh, thank you. That really means a lot. Thank you.
I think that's one thing that is natural in a book like this, where you start to think, oh, who do I identify as? Am I an Elizabeth or am I a Bryony? Am I an Ash or a Jack? And, as you get into it more and more, I felt like there wasn't, there wasn't a clear villain, a clear hero. And I also, it seemed to me that so much of what like Bryony, sorry about my alerts there. Like Bryony, her position with her mother's influence, that we saw how complex this issue is. I mean, were you wanting to talk about, were you thinking about vaccination in particular, or were you thinking about parental choices, or an even bigger question, choices? When you were thinking about writing the book, and it would, obviously that's the touchstone, that it kind of is the spark for everything. But what were you thinking in terms of this conflict?
I was thinking about all of those kind of layers that you talk about, that you mentioned, but I think I was very much using I tried to focus on the vaccination issue, because otherwise I felt that I would just go too broad and become kind of quite overwhelmed. And that's where it's so helpful having characters who are very strong, because very clearly what they will and they won't do. Like, it was very clear to me that Bri would behave one way and Elizabeth would behave another way and Rosalind would behave another way. So I think once you have those characters defined, it helps sort of crystallize what I was trying to do. But yes, certainly thinking about all of those big things. But I think if I felt about choices broadly, my head would explode and I wouldn't be able to write. So yeah, on a day-to-day level, whilst I was writing, I would just really focus on the vaccination issue. Yeah.
And it's astonishing, you were saying that you wrote this during the first lockdown. I mean, it's come out and it feels like it's right in the middle of a conversation we're still having. We're talking about, another round of COVID. We're going into flu season. And this kind of conversation is just rolling on and on.
I know. Do you know what? It's been totally bonkers, the timing of it, because I obviously started writing it. I started writing it before, and I've been researching it for months and months before March 2020 came around. And then when that happened, and I was in that first lockdown, and I found it actually perfect conditions for my work, because my husband couldn't work, so he was looking after our toddler. And I didn't have any FOMO because I knew that no one was doing anything fun, and I was pregnant, so I knew that I only had this very finite amount of time to write the book. So I really kind of cracked on during that first lockdown period. But also I was writing, I was thinking, who the hell is going to want to read about vaccination when we're going through all of this? And actually, originally I set the book in 2020. So I was writing it, sort of up to date. And I said to my agent, I was like, I can't write this book, obviously, without mentioning COVID. And so she just said, oh, we'll just set it in 2019. It'll be fine. So that's exactly what I did. It's kind of, it's the precursor to.
Right. It's a bit like if you don't want to include TikTok, or you don't want to include mobile phones, just like go put it in the past.
In the 80s. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was a really interesting time, actually, to write the book, and to just, because I didn't have a publisher in place, so I was writing it sort of speculatively. And my agent was brilliant, because she gave me some good old kicks up the bum by saying things like, if you don't write this book, someone else will.
I know. Oh,
so sort of, that set the panic in me. So I was like, oh God,
I'm already behind with you.
Yeah, exactly. because I think it's one of those subject matters, isn't it? It's kind of hiding in plain sight almost, you know. As you say, it's something that we're all kind of having to think about a lot. Yeah, so I was just incredibly lucky with the timing, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think the story itself, this dynamic between these two kind of chalk and cheese friends, and you do, while they're both clearly drawn as characters, you keep reading because you think, what's going to happen?
Mm.
You know, you have that sense of foreboding, and of course, the way the book cover teases it, you know, something's going to go horribly wrong. But I just found myself, it was like, you know, up late at night going, I know I shouldn't. I need to get to bed, but what's going to happen next? So
Oh, good.
yeah, it has that real kind of fish hook in you that just keeps pulling you along.
Oh, I'm really glad to hear that, because actually one of the things I remember from when I first started writing the book was, you know, how to make the issue around childhood vaccinations an enjoyable read, you know, how to make it entertaining as well as you know, emotionally and hopefully intellectually a little bit challenging, you know. So yeah, so it's great to hear that it's entertaining as well.
Yes.
It's a relief.
So we have a comment from Justine. She says, I have 3 kids born between 1981 and 1995. I've been through the whole vaccine gamut. I have firm ideas now and found myself feeling irritated with certain characters. The book allows the reader to have their own ideas, which is a good thing. And then she kind of expounds on that and says, my ideas change with each child. As a mother, I was caught up in the false science report about MMR. And of course, you know, that was, I mean, some time ago now, if I were just guessing 20 years or so, right?
80, I think longer than that, 87, right. I believe.
Yeah.
If you're and the Andrew Wakefield
Yeah.
article was published in the Lancet in 87, I think.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's some time ago. And it's really difficult to, I think, just to talk about vaccines, that it's sometimes hard to separate the wheat from the chaff in the same way, like that little vignette, but with the tabloid reporter. I loved that because he was like, yeah, it's not my job to tell the truth. It's my job to give a story. So I've got a bug flying around. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and Justine said, yes, Andrew Wakefield did a great deal of damage to moms in terms of making sensible decisions.
Mm. So, and I think that was something I found really interesting. So in my research, talking to so we have vaccinated our sons, mm-hmm. And will continue to do so. But something I found very interesting talking to people who, and we have good friends who have chosen not to vaccinate. I remember there was one woman that I spoke to who was, and it was so interesting. It was a real kind of light bulb moment for me, where she was talking. She was a scientist herself, and she knew all the. She seemed to know a lot of facts and figures around vaccination, and I thought in our conversation that she had vaccinated her child, and then it turned out that she hadn't vaccinated, and it was because, and her reasons for not vaccinating was because she heard. I think it was like a cousin of hers had a child who had a really quite severe adverse response to a vaccination, and so she'd chosen not to vaccinate her child. And I realized after that actually facts, you can know all the facts and figures you want, but I feel like emotion, certainly for me, and I think for a lot of people, emotion will win out every single day. You know, mm-hmm. Like all of that goes out the window if you hear of an emotional story that has happened that goes against all the facts and figures.
Yes.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? You know, it's like the emotion always weighs out.
Right. It's not the 99 who are okay. It's the one who had a horrible reaction. And you know, that's our worst fear as a parent. And I think in particular, one thing I think what makes this book particularly fitting for the Noon Book Club and part of, you know, Eleanor's Queenager whole idea is that it's really a woman's story. It's funny, vaccination is something that moms in particular are very active and organized and well read around, no matter what side of the divide they're on.
Mm,
I myself, like, my child's been completely vaccinated. Um, but you see that, like, there are these whole communities that are built up, and they seem to be mostly of moms who are very active. They've done loads of reading. They've got loads of reasons why they believe what they believe. And it's kind of a mom's battleground in a way.
yeah, absolutely. I think quite often medical stuff does often become the mum's remit.
Mm,
Not always, of course, but often.
yeah.
So we feel that sense of responsibility. We feel like we have to make those decisions.
Mm,
And then I think it does become quite almost tribal. I remember finding it really interesting speaking to parents who haven't vaccinated, who, we talk very much about the community and wanting to be in the vaccine hesitant community, because they felt like they were their people. And it does become almost like, you draw your line in the sand, and you say, this is who I am and what I believe in.
mhm.
And I think there's almost like there's a little bit of danger in there as well, isn't there? Because then it makes it harder to then sort of change your mind or to review your choices.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's also one thing that is very well demonstrated in the book, is that sense of these ideals. They're these tendrils. They reach out through our whole lives, and that in a way, once you're on one side, it's hard to change your mind or
Mm,
change your tribe, right?
mm,
And we feel that with there's a moment where Ash is listening to Bry's mother, and he's like, "Oh, she grew up with this. Like, no wonder she's kind of anti-vax or
mm,
vaccine hesitant. It's because she's had her mother talking at her like this for ages, and her mother's very a part of that culture. And
mm,
so, a break with these ideas means almost a break with your tribe."
yeah, absolutely.
And we
I
feel,
actually have quite a lot of compassion for Zara, for
yeah,
Bryony's mum,
hmm
um, because I think that for me there is that thing of like, she's almost like trying to, it's always that thing of like blaming herself is easier, like for her son's disability.
hmm
It's almost like, oh, it must have been something that I did to him. It's my fault somehow as his mother. I took him to go and have that injection. And even though it's been proven time and time and time again that there is no link between vaccines and autism, but it's almost easier for her to blame herself
hmm
than to say, this is out of my hands. This is who my child is.
yeah.
Which I find really, it's really, really sad, but also understandable,
Yeah, heartbreaking. Ishbel has said, I'm embedded in the parent care community where everyone avoids talking about vaccines because it is so inflammatory.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And she said earlier in the comments, her ideas were formed when her son was born in 2013 and there was a measles epidemic due to low MMR uptake. He was in intensive care for a month and we couldn't have a single visitor for the entire time. And she still gets incredibly angry when people talk about not vaccinating their children. As you say, it's incredibly emotive. I mean, it's interesting that we have had these kind of waves of people taking it up and avoiding it. And now it's, I mean, my home country in America, it's not just politics. It is, it's dividing the country, these ideas around vaccination, because they also tie into a lot of other political ideas.
Mm,
There's a comment from Ruth Bush, says that, it's the fear of something new. She's an epidemiologist and I'm 100% behind vaccination and has no patience with parents who did not vaccinate until COVID vaccines were introduced. It's helped me to walk in others' shoes for the first time.
mm.
It's quite an exciting thing to have your book do.
Yeah. Gosh, thank you. I don't- Um,
So
I really appreciate those comments. And I just wanted to go back to, is it Ishmael's?
Yeah, Ishbel.
Ishbel. To what she said, I think that for me was the hardest. Yeah, talking to parents who chose not to vaccinate, and then talking to the parents of children who had conditions like cystic fibrosis, who would say, well, look, I can't send my my kid goes to school, he has to go, we have to try and encourage him to have a life and go to school. But literally a cold could mean pneumonia, and that could mean 2 months in hospital, or, you know, and when you talk to the parents of children who have very real, very debilitating conditions, and that, you know, and you just think, my God, that is the reason it's so important for us all to vaccinate. Like, it's not really about, well, it is about my kids, but it's about everyone else's kids as well. Like, we're, you know, like, and that's what just like would blow my mind, would be like, and that's actually where I almost found it hard to bite my tongue talking to people who were like, oh, I just don't vaccinate because I just don't want to put that stuff in my kid's body and I don't believe in it, and would kind of have all these kind of slightly wishy-washy ideas about it. But that just hearing that comment just made me think about those, how important it is to protect the most vulnerable, you know.
Yeah. So Ruth says, probably too broad a brush to say this, but I know my husband has never had an awkward conversation about vaccinations. Why is this an issue so firmly in the mom arena?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it is interesting that I was just thinking right before I read that comment about the role that Ash and Jack play in the book, and how they're different. I mean, they're distinct and different characters, but, you know, they both have these kind of unsatisfying relationships with their wives for different reasons. They're both a little bit sidelined in family life, even though Ash, you know, he's not going away to a job all day, whereas Jack is. And can you tell us just a little bit about, as you were writing those characters, kind of what you were thinking about and what you were wanting to bring up or portray there?
So I'll start with Elizabeth and Jack. I find it really interesting that there's often this dynamic in heterosexual relationships, sort of traditional heterosexual relationships, where you know, it's the man going out with a big job and the woman who looks after the kids, where actually I wanted to have a couple where actually they weren't really suited to those roles. Where actually they were both much happier, much better suited to the man, to Jack being at home with the kids. You know, and he's great, he's a wonderful dad, and he's not very happy in his work. And actually Elizabeth going out to work. And I think that's what the even though it's obviously a tragic, very difficult time, the court case really gives that to her, gives her that sort of like focus and energy, but also like reveals how she is better suited in that role than perhaps the, you know, the primary carer for their kids. So that was one thing. And then Jack, yeah, I wanted to have him as a really loving person, but also someone who's slightly fallen out of his life. Like, he doesn't really know what his role is. He's a bit unsure, and he's married this woman who's very clear, very confident, and I think he has been sort of slightly left in her wake a bit. But then, as I say, he sort of finds later on in the novel, I think he finds his rhythm and his ability again, and I think he is much happier actually as the novel progresses. And then Ash, I really wanted to have that, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler for anyone who hasn't read the book, but you know, that moment sort of a third of the way through the book where we find out that Ash has taken Alba for a couple of vaccinations, and it's actually an enormous betrayal.
Mhm.
But there's also that feeling of like, well, he has rights as well, like,
Oh,
you
it
know.
it was, can I just say, Emily, it was delicious. I felt like that was so real as a marriage thing where you and your partner, you disagree maybe, or maybe you don't, and then somebody does something, and that feeling of betrayal is very deep and very real. But at the same time, you know, he has an opinion too. I just thought that was like just such a real relationship moment.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and I think also spurred by that article, you know, by knowing the guy whose
Oh, yeah.
daughter had died, um, kind of made me feel like, well, yeah, good bloody on you, Ash. Like, um,
Why are the mother's views, or why are Bry's views more
why
valid
do they,
than
yeah,
why do
why
they
you're
take precedent?
sidelined? Yeah. But again, I think it goes back to this issue of emotion. With Bri, it is all emotion. And we learn about that as we learn more about her history and growing up with her brother and growing up with her mum's intense sort of almost, you know, self-loathing,
Mm,
uh, that she did this to her, that she feels that she did this to her son, which she absolutely did not.
mhm.
So I love writing the guys, and I love writing that, you know, that jogging scene
The
where
jogging is
they're
great.
talking about the party and the email and stuff, like, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And actually I'm really glad that a lot of the feedback I've had is that people have really enjoyed that the men have been a real part of the novel, and not just kind of like a footnote. So
Right. Right. It's not like the flip side of the Bechdel test, right? Where it's like there are only women who populate this city, this
yeah,
neighborhood. It's like, oh, there are actually men there too. There
yeah,
are,
we still need men. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's good. I mean, I found too that the dialogue was very natural.
Oh,
Like when they were talking. I mean, did you find that you were, I don't know, taking notes when listening to friends, or did you ask your friends, or did you sometimes in social situations throw out vaccination as a topic and watch people talk so you could kind of
oh
get,
yeah.
you know?
Oh yeah. I love doing that. I still do. Because it goes back to this thing of like, the stuff that we find it hardest to talk about is often, I think, the most interesting.
Mm,
Like, there's a reason why we find it hard to talk about it, because it's difficult and contentious and divisive. But like, don't you just want to like? I just always want to go there, like, you know. Um, I think actually, in truth, like, so when my husband first read the book, he was like, oh my God, Elizabeth and Bryony. He was like, you're both of them, you know. And I have actually been rereading the book because I haven't read it in a long time, and I've got a few kind of, you know, lovely interviews coming up, and so I thought I better reread it just to kind of get back into the headspace of it. And I've been reading it and been thinking, shit, I am a little bit Brian, I am a little bit Elizabeth.
mhm,
So I think almost the way they talk is possibly very similar to the way that, you know, I would talk
mhm.
with my friends. So, but I'm really happy to hear that you like the dialogue. It's great.
Yes. Yeah, kind of as a writer, you get really tuned into whether it sounds real or if it's like, I'm explaining a plot point.
Yes, 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 exactly. Yeah, it's all about the subtlety, isn't it? You don't want everything just to feel like text. You want some subtext in there too.
Yes, exactly. So Sharon Horgan has bought the TV rights.
Yes, she has.
Can you tell us anything more about that? Or
I can't really.
Mhm,
It's sort of at a point where hopefully it will be happening.
hmm,
But it still remains to be seen. We've got some really fantastic screenwriters involved, and yeah, they have some brilliant ideas about how to sort of expand the world of the book and draw
Mhm.
out different characters and things. So yeah, I'm really excited.
I hope.
But so
I
like healthily, hopefully, but not too excited. I need to keep my feet to the ground with it.
Yeah, exactly. I hope, what's her name? Rosalind? Is that her name?
Yeah, my God. Yeah, I love her.
I hope ooh, she just feels delicious.
Yeah, I know. I keep thinking someone who was it? Someone said the other day, they were like, Rosalind should be played by this woman. Was it like Julianne Moore? It was like someone like, in like my dream cast.
Yes, exactly. So have you been doing your dream cast just in your mind for fun?
God, well, I'm honestly, I'm really awful at remembering like actors' names. As you can tell, because I can't remember the.
She like that one, she's blonde.
Yes, I mean, she was in Mulder and Scully. That was her like breakthrough one.
Oh, Gillian Anderson.
Gillian Anderson.
Oh, she would be amazing.
Gorgeous. Yeah, she would be dream Rosalind.
She would be. Oh my gosh, I could just imagine how bitchy she would be.
Oh.
Do you have so just for fun, your Elizabeth, your Bri, any dream casting? You have in this budget the whole Hollywood firmament, as well as kind of the British greatest, theater lights. Who would you choose? Now I'd put you on.
Really like Carey Mulligan.
Oh, she would be good. But which one?
So interestingly, Merman, who's Sharon Hawkins' company, they suggested her for Elizabeth. And I was like, whoa, like I always saw her as much more Bri. And she said, actually, no, she plays very strong. She can play very strong sort of against type women. But I don't know. I'm not very good at this sort of thing. And then also I end up getting too excited, and I mustn't get too excited.
So I'd like to, because this is a meeting, I was thinking we could all turn on our cameras.
Oh, great.
Emily could actually see all of y'all in the audience if you fancy it. And then if anybody, and unmute, and if anybody just has any kind of last few comments on the last few moments, sorry, I've removed spotlight. And so this way y'all should be able to see yourselves. No one wants to turn off their
Oh, hello.
Hi. Ishmael. Oh, it's you, Ishmael. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. And I apologize because I have my son here, so he's very noisy. So I've locked him out of the room for the minute, but he'll get hold of me. So
How old is he?
He's 9.
Okay.
But he's non-verbal, so he's very shouty. I think he'd be shouty even if he was verbal, quite frankly.
How did you find it reading the book, Ishmael?
So good, but it really did. A lot of it hit really close to home because I'm a trustee for Parent Carer Forum charity, and we deal with, as you can imagine, thousands of parents with autistic children, and it is that absolute match to the kindling if you even mention it. So but I was absolutely, once I started thinking, I'll read it for a quick hour and I'll put it down and come back. Oh no, half the book later. It was really, I loved all the different points of view.
Yeah.
And having said it, I really loved the male characters.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the same with me, Ishmael. I thought it was amazing. And you see Justine there. Are those your dogs?
Yes, I've rather a lot of dogs. My children are grown up, so I've rather a lot of dogs.
How many?
4. But and they're all vaccinated. You might be surprised to know. But I went through the whole thing because obviously my kids are all grown up and older now, but I went through the whole thing with vaccination. My daughter being vaccinated without thought. That's what you did. But of course, she was with these separate vaccinations and they weren't quite so young. And then they pulled vaccinations forward to being done to very young children. And I got a bit of a wobble about that. It's like, whoa, this is a very tiny baby, and you're telling me you're already going to, you know, stick a needle in him. And so I didn't vaccinate, and did only partial vaccinations, a bit like Bry's husband. You know, well, I'll pick and choose. And it's odd, really, because my grandfather, who was born in Italy, was profoundly deaf and had poor eyesight because he had measles when he was young.
Oh, right.
Completely separated him from the rest of the family. He'd been born normal, but somewhere around 6, there was this outbreak of measles and he was affected. And I wondered why I went through that with my middle child, because I know how terrible it is if these diseases strike and they, you know, lead permanent problems. And I know a lot of parents, because I was in teaching, then talked about the link between the jab and autism and all that sort of thing. And of course, that then puts you off. So the real problem we have is misinformation.
Totally.
And the real problem the States had, because I was actually in the United States when COVID struck and Trump was, you know, anti-everything. It's flu, it's just going to disappear and that sort of thing. Misinformation on social media is huge. So what was interesting about the book in a way was that it didn't seem to me there was a lot of misinformation. There was that wonderful vignette with trolling that I thought was, yeah, that really gets you, doesn't it? And amazing how an ordinary person and does these horrendous things. I love that, absolutely love that bit of the book, because I thought it's so true. You can't spot a troll on the bus, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
that actually, she's being trolled in real life, you know. She's actually like, I felt again so much empathy for her, because I was like, God, she's had a, you know, people are horrible to her the whole time.
Yeah.
And not even being able to, I think I really felt, I was able really to imagine when reading the book what it would be like for both those families when things happened, of those shifting sands of sympathy. And, you know, in your own home, in your own neighborhood, where you feel kind of at sea from all the warring opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. In the community.
Yeah, I do think in the 80s, you were talking about, if you don't want to involve TikTok and everything, set your book in the past. And in fact, I'm writing something set in the 70s and 80s because I didn't want to involve mobile phones. And it's like, you're going to have to go back that far in that case. Anyway, I think you're right. In the 80s, there was rumor, there was anecdotes, but there wasn't quite the level of misinformation you get now. So I think the book was very interesting from that point of view, because it sort of had to involve everything that's going on at the moment. And yet you've got two intelligent women who you know, have their own very strong point of view. So it was very, very well constructed. I thought, you know, well done.
Thanks.
I'm not surprised it's being picked up for TV.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And thank you, Emily. I want to say thank you to those of you who decided not to turn your cameras on and join us, but we really appreciate your coming and being a part of the discussion. Bernie, Fiona, Ruth, EA, Becky, Allison, Claire, Katie, and Maggie. Ishmael and Justine, it's really great to hear your comments and your insights and see you tonight. So the book is coming out in paperback fairly soon, in September, yes?
15th of September, yes.
Right, so perfect to buy.
A couple of weeks.
Those on your Christmas list. We can look for it, hopefully, coming to our small screens very soon. And Emily is hard at work on her next book as well.
Yes.
You have to say yes.
Yes.
Maggie says, thanks for an interesting conversation. Bernie, thank you. This was amazing. I haven't read the book, but I'm going to buy it now. Thank you. Well, Bernie, thank you for coming. And yeah, so thanks so much, you guys, for bearing with me, for being the non-Eleanor host of Noon Book Club. It's been amazing. Amazing to talk to you, Emily. Amazing to hear from the rest of you. And we look forward to seeing you at another book club soon. Thanks so
Thanks
much.
so much, everyone.
Thank you.
for having me.
Bye.
Bye.